Welcome to Miniatures Rundown, and I'm getting down with the sickness. Can we use them as music, Cody? So one of my favorite armies in 40k is Death Guard. I've been playing Death Guard in some form or another for 20 years. Even when it was just some Plague Marines and stuff that you could give Mark and Nurgle to, I really, really love Death Guard. They're one of my favorite legions and one of my favorite Chaos Gods, and I really feel that the forces of Nurgle are going to see a significant buff going into 11th edition. There's a lot of positive stuff. One of the big things that I think, and this is just from the impact of the core rules and how it interacts with Death Guard, and Death Guard's main mechanic is cover. So cover used to give +1 to save, which was pretty strong, versus Death Guard, who didn't have access to a ton of high AP at range unless they got really close. So now what we have is it being -1 to hit. And on top of that, this kind of works in a recursive way for Nurgle, because now they didn't benefit a ton from being in cover a whole lot, but now that it's -1 to hit and being able to stack that with the contagion that gives -1 to hit, I think that suddenly you're going to see that Nurgle is way more durable than it used to be. You can also apply you can afflict things at range using Plague Marines or strats or other abilities, which means that being able to hand out -1 to hit to your opponent while being in cover means that you're going to be taking a lot less damage on the return volley. And I think that's a really strong interaction with them in the core rules going into 11th. Not to mention that assault units are stronger in 11th. Being able to charging has been made quite a bit easier. And Plague Marines, souped up for close combat, are no joke. They will tear apart so many things in the combat phase. And this is no different. And a small sneaky buff to them is how precision works versus characters. Because of the new wound allocation, precision will affect only one of the characters, and the rest can be put into groups that take the damage after that character. So for instance, if you have a unit Plague Marines with a Biologus and a Foul Blight Spawn attached, with precision, one of those character groups is moved to the front of the line, but the other character group still remains in the back. So your characters are a little bit safer from precision than they used to be. It's still a problem, don't get me wrong. Your snipers will still tear apart your support characters, which you need to be active to make your Plague Marines operate at their best efficiency. So that's a small negative that comes with Death Guard into 11th, but in many ways it's also a buff, because now precision can't just kill both of your characters, at least as easily. As far as detachments go, Death Guard got off with a pretty good amount of ways to combine their detachments. Only one of them is 3 detachment points, and that's the Virulent Vectorum. And for good reason. The Virulent Vectorum is the one that gives your entire army sticky objectives, and also makes each objective that is made sticky into a vector for contagion. So with that all being said, having your entire army make sticky objectives is a really strong ability. So I think that is worthy of the 3 detachment points that it costs. The rest of them, though, are between 1 and 2 detachment points. And there's lots of really interesting and cool ways to combine this army. The Champions of Contagion is one of my favorites. It allows you to switch up your contagion depending on what you feel like the situation needs to be, and allows you to add more contagions to your roster as the game goes on, depending on what detachments you take, depending on what enhancements you take in your army. So and that's, since it's 2 detachment points, I can combine it with something else that is one of my favorites. And I love my little dirty bugs, my little demon engines. And the perfect detachment for them is 1 attachment point, and it's contagion engines. And it's pretty simple, but what that does is it gives all of your demon engines, except for the Defiler and the Plague Burst Crawler, assault on their weapons, which is so good for the Mephitic Blight Haulers, the Bloat Drones, both versions of Bloat Drones. Being able to get assault means that their threat range is so much bigger, and they are a key part of the range support that Death Guard has at their disposal. We don't have a ton of really strong long-ranged firepower And so we depend a lot on our medium ranged and short range firepower in order to take down big targets like knights and tanks and stuff like that. So being able to give our heavy hitters in that regard a assault means that they're just going to be able to reach that much further out and impact the foe much earlier in the game and more effectively. The other one that is still really good, and I actually think that this one is really good more so into 11th, is Mortarian's Hammer. Now, Mortarian's Hammer is really cool because it allows you to put Afflicted on stuff that is outside of 12 inches of any of your friendly units. So what that means in essence, though, is that you can put your diseases, specifically stuff like -1 to hit, onto things that are outside of 12 inches, and meaning that if you put on the long range support stuff that's going to fire into your stuff that's in cover, that you're going to be doubling up on the benefit of cover, which is just really great. The really adding to the durability of Nurgle, which is just really huge. And speaking of taking advantage of cover, and this is going to be a theme through a lot of the Chaos factions, is if you're going to take the Taliban Summoners, which allows you to bring demons into your army, is demons now benefit from cover. Finally, after so many additions, demons finally get to benefit from being in cover. -1 to hit and +1 to save was never useful for demons. And now with them being -1 to hit while within cover is going to be huge for them in their durability. Already Nurgle demons can be pretty durable. They're not as durable as Plague Marines, for instance, but you have more of them. So the wound density is a little bit higher. And they're great for holding objectives, and Plague Bearers aren't bad in combat anymore. So being able to really take advantage of the core rules with demons now, which it sounds weird to say it like that because you would think that you'd be able to take advantage of core rules with any army. Demons were kind of an exception, and that was kind of a sticking point for a lot of Chaos players for a long time. But being able to do that is really, really cool. I'm not going to go through all the detachments and read them all out to you. That would be both boring for you and for me. But I'm loving talking about the things that have me most excited to play in 11th edition. One of the things that I am most excited about is the big man himself, Mortarion. I love Mortarion, and he was pretty good in 10th edition, and in 11th, I don't think that he's lost any of his hate and his potency. He still has really great ranged weapons, and now with the buff to psychic weapons being that they do not affect their ballistic skill and hit roll is not affected anymore, means that his Rotwind is so much more effective. It was already hitting on 2s, so, but it only being -2 AP meant that if he was firing into cover, it would go down -1 AP, which limited the amount of things that he could kill. Now, with it being devastating wounds with psychic, meaning that cover is basically ignored, that the Rotwind from him is going to be so much stronger, and I'm really looking forward to that. And of course, because he has fly, being able to take to the sky, to be able to move over terrain, means that he has a much more impact on the battlefield than he has in previous. Without having to go around buildings or around around terrain features, he can now just fly over them and charge. And of course, the changes to charging being that much stronger, being able to get into combat is much easier now. And that's where he excels. And not to mention his Lord of the Death Guard being able to move things around in the movement phase after something ends within 8 inches of him or 9 inches of him, that you get to manipulate the battlefield that much more, which is kind of a standard Primarch ability, but it's still really nice, especially with Assault being so much easier to achieve in 11th edition. Allows you to manipulate the battlefield just that much more, which I think is really handy. So I think that between all of these things, that I think that the Scions of Mortarion are looking particularly good going into 11th edition, and I'm really excited to put them on the field and see what disgusting things I can put forth and infect the universe with. But what I want to know is, what do you think about Death Guard? And what do you think of them in 11th edition? Have you played any games with them? Let me know. I'd love to hear from you. And as always, if you like this content and want to see more, don't forget to like and subscribe. And check out our Patreon link down below. Every dollar helps, and it helps us bring more content like this to you and more cool stuff to come. Sincerely, thank you. And praise Nurgle and happy gaming.